My name's Dan Oates. This is my shameless advertising for my historical book company that I have. And I won't bore you with those details. I'm hoping this clicker's going to work. Okay, there we go. The website, there's a couple websites in the county. Historic Hampshire is probably, historichampshire.org is probably the best website in the county. Charlie Hall runs that, and it really is. Did that die? It's back. Seems to come and go. Maybe it's too far away. But Charlie Hall manages that website and does an excellent job. He's got thousands and thousands of resources on that website. Mine is small potatoes compared to Charlie's. I sell books, and I have some free downloads there too. You can go, and a lot of people are familiar with the Maximum Swisher History of Hampshire County book. I've got the index on that because it's not indexed. The earlier copies aren't indexed, so you can go to have a free download for that index, which will help you with your research. So I try to put stuff up there like that people can use. And as I go through this, I didn't really have a chance to put anything together formally, so I'm just, you throw it up against the wall and see what sticks. So if you're interested in something, we can dive into it a little bit more. If not, that's fine too. I do just a lot of, scanning of old documents, and then I do a lot of editing of those documents, and then they're available to anybody who wants them. My problem is you don't know what I've got, and a lot of the times I don't know what I've got. So if people contact me and want information on families or a particular subject, I'll scan. If I don't have it done already, then I'll send it out to them for free. If they want to pay me, they can pay Helping Hands across the street, make a donation to the Hampshire County Library. I don't need the money, and that's not what I'm doing. I sell books for money. I don't do research for money. Hanging Rock Rebel was my first book, which was actually published in the Hampshire Review back in the 1890s. Lieutenant Blue came out of the war along with I don't know how many other Hampshire County veterans, but he was one of many. He just happened to be the one that wrote the history of it. I think it came about because Maxwell and Swisher were here at almost the same time, a little prior to, and they asked him to write some of the history of the Civil War for them to publish in Maxwell and Swisher. And I think they just sort of jump-started him. He said, oh, this is okay. So I'm going to write that, and he wrote 2 full columns in the Hampshire Review for 13 weeks. And someone asked me to research some Civil War soldiers at the library. And those were back in the days when you had the microfilm. And you had to scroll through the Hampshire Review to find these veterans. So scrolling through there, I saw Chapter 3, Experiences of Lieutenant John Blue. I went, oh, that's pretty cool. And I scrolled, and he went all the way up to Chapter 13, quick, because he was hot. It's August. He didn't want to write during the summer. So he stopped, and I thought, well, I'm going to take those 26 columns, full columns in the Hampshire Review, front page, and put them into a little book and put them in the library for people to read, because it's pretty cool. And those were pre-computer days. You just had to type the articles as you saw it. Then I was there like 3 months later, and I ran into Volume 2, Chapter 36. And I went, oh my God, this is a lot of information here. And he went on, and the actual book ended up being 300 pages of first-hand accounts that Lieutenant Blue wrote. And it is, I did not edit it at all other than clean it up and put it out there. And some of the reviews, I took a beating on it because I didn't footnote it enough, and I didn't change the spelling, because he spelled some names differently at different times in the book. But I'm not John Blue, so I was his public relations guy, so to speak. So when the book came out, I got beat up a little bit by the critics, but I didn't really care because it was John Blue's words and not mine. So that's been real good. It's gone through about 5 different printings. on since then. This one is sitting over here somewhere. And it's Josh Zimmerman was a local attorney in town. And somehow in the past 30 years, I ended up with a manuscript of his memoirs. He was sick and he dictated those to his daughter while he was in bed. And he was a scallywag. He was a really neat guy. He was a attorney, president of the company, he was not scallywags. But he was also a hunter and an outdoorsman. And there's a lot of really cool fishing stories, hunting stories of the day back in the early 1900s up to about 1930. And the interesting thing that I found in it is the guys who were the retired veterans who were in Lieutenant Blue's book as his soldiers that he fought with after the war, they became public figures in Hampshire County. As Lieutenant Blue did, he was the assessor. But a lot of them became attorneys, and he went hunting with the same guys that he was in the war with. And they could be pretty ornery or practical jokers, exploding cigars, that sort of thing they did. And a lot of cool little 3 or 4 page stories in that. That was something I got bored during COVID. That's what I had to end up doing because I didn't know what else to do with myself. One of the things that we have in Hampshire County, which I've always kept sort of on the down low, I don't really advertise it too much because people, this is not the time of life to advertise Confederate memorials. But this was the first Confederate memorial erected after the Civil War. This was the first one in the nation. And it was not very popular then, and while we had Confederate Memorial Holiday in Romney back in the 20s, teens, 30s, we had 2,500 people in town for Confederate Memorial Holiday. So, and it centered around this, and the daughters of the Confederate veterans are the one that erected it. They had bake sales. They raised money. They raised $1,400 is what it cost. Went to Baltimore and got the thing made. It was, if you look at the far left there for you, the little octagonal scroll there, which is in the center of it. They had to take that to the Gaddis brothers in Baltimore. When they chiseled that, Baltimore was not the place after the war to celebrate the Confederacy. They didn't want anything to do with it. So the people who did the scrolling and the chiseling on that, the lettering, had to come back in at night. They created the thing when they were finished, except for the last 2 words, which are Southern Rights. So they kept that off. They closed up the crate. They came back in after hours, chiseled Southern Rights on it, and then crated it up again and shipped it out the next morning because they weren't allowed to do anything celebrating the South after the war. So it was quite controversial until it got here, and then everybody celebrated, and they had a big party, and God knows what happened. It was good. It was good.
Could I ask where it is?
I'm sorry?
Could I ask where that is?
Oh, it's in the cemetery at the end of town, and it's right there in all its glory. It has been vandalized once, but it wasn't by anybody that had any clue, but they were just kids being stupid. And they caught it and they ended up cleaning it, so that was okay. Yes, sir?
Who were the carpetbaggers?
The what?
The carpetbaggers?
The carpetbaggers, as far as I know, they were people who came in after the war.
Right.
And they tried to take advantage of families.
Time with Skyways or what?
Well, I'm not sure if the scallywags and the carpetbaggers were probably, I would think they probably came from the same genetic background, yes.
Independent contractors.
Yeah, independent contractors, that's right, yeah. Yeah, the carpetbaggers were not very well, they were not very happy. Romney was a terrible place to be after the war because none of the Confederate soldiers could hold public office. They couldn't hold land, they couldn't own land, they couldn't vote. They were traitors to the United States. So until they got that all resolved through Congress, they had no rights whatsoever. And a number of Confederate soldiers, including John Blue. John Blue thought about it. He put it in a letter at the end of the book that a lot of these Confederate soldiers moved to Brazil and took up farming down there. But Lieutenant Blue thought about it, but actually didn't do it. It was close. That'd be quite the move in those days, I would think. Romney to Brazil. These were letters that I bought in an auction 25, 40 years ago or something. And I found them in the bottom of a drawer when I was cleaning out my desk about 5, 6 years ago. And I had no idea at the time when I bought them who Louis F. Mays was, because that was pre-internet, pre-ancestry. You had no way to research it like you do now. You just type it in and boom, up comes everything. Ancestry.com. So I dictated or scanned all of those letters, and then I went to search for who ancestor would still be out there that would like to have those letters, because I didn't want them. I think I paid $5 for them. So nobody else wanted them. I bought them, it was ever in a sandwich bag. And I started reading those, and I put them in order of the date, and I really got to know the guy. I mean, I felt like I was a friend of his, because he really detailed all the things that went on during the war. And he had a girlfriend back home in Barber County, out in the center part of the state, and he really was an interesting guy. And all of a sudden, the last letter was from his commanding officer who had been shot and killed. And I was like, I felt like I lost a friend at that point, because I was sort of invested in the guy. And it ended up, I did find his great-grandson or great-great-grandson in Delaware. He's on Hampshire history. I put it on the Hampshire history Facebook page. And this guy said, oh yeah, it's my great-grandfather, great-grandfather. Great. Wow. And then it ended up being Doc Calvert's same. Doc Calvert's great-great-grandfather too. But I'd already sent him off to the guy in Delaware. But that's her first cousin or something. So they knew each other. And she couldn't believe that I sent him all the way to Delaware, and she was 6 blocks from where I lived. So, but, that's the way it goes. I'm big into family Bibles. If anybody's got old family Bibles that they don't want, I take them, scan them, then I start looking for people who own them or would want to own them. I don't want them. I don't want anything. I scan and return. That's my big deal. Don't want to own anything. I want to scan it, give it back. This one was the Ruckmans, and Samuel Ruckman, there was 3 Samuel Ruckmans in Hampshire County, all with the name Elizabeth as their wife. And it was a mess trying to figure out. I went out to Kirby to somebody, and I said, oh, I can't believe you found our Bible. And he started looking through it, and he said, this is not my family. So I brought it back home, and ended up, the lady, I forget how, she was on Ancestry.com. I messaged her, and I never heard from her for 4 or 5 months. And I didn't think much about it. I just sort of forgot about it. The box with the book was sitting somewhere. And I ended up, she ended up emailing me and saying, yes, that is my great-great-great-grandfather. I would love to have the Bible. Well, then she just dropped off the face of the earth again. And she was from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Well, I was dating a girl near Tulsa at the time. So I flew out, and Jenny, this girl, she's a nice young lady, and she doesn't really understand the way we roll back here. Like you knock on people's door and say, hi, I'm Dan, I got your family Bible, And so I looked on the internet, found this lady's address, and Jenny's sitting in the car beside me. She's saying, I can't believe you're doing this. The police are going to come get us. You're going to be arrested. And I said, no, we're okay. And I knocked on the door, and I had a note prepared in case the lady wasn't there. And I said, I was in town. I thought I would connect with you, get your address so I could ship you the Bible. Nobody home, slid the note through the door, and left. Next day, I went to the airport. I was in the airport, the phone rings. What's this lady who wants the Bible? And I said, I just thought you maybe disappeared. I said, she goes, no, we winter in Arizona. So we weren't in Oklahoma. And I said, well, I was at your house yesterday. And she goes, you were at my house? I mean, you could tell. She was not happy. And I said, well, there's 3 cars in the driveway. And she goes, that's why we leave them there. I said, well, I have a girlfriend who lives near Tulsa. We were in town. I thought I'd stop by and meet you so I could get your address and ship you the book. Oh, okay. And I said, well, after you know, she said, we'll be home tomorrow. I said, okay. So we connected, and then I mailed the Bible to her and out in Oklahoma when I got home, and she was thrilled to death that she got the Bible. So I love this. It's not as easy as you think it was to return things. You need to spend hours and hours trying to track people down. This was another one. These medals here were found at the schools for the deaf and the blind, down at the maintenance shed, which used to be the old Quail Hill Stables, up on the top shelf of a bookcase. Nobody knows how they got there, where they came from, or anything. The article about the Civil War letters had appeared in the newspaper a month before, and they found those medals, and they said, call Dan, he'll figure it out. so they called me, and I thought, oh, I've got to do this. I've got to get these medals back to who they belong to. So this Jacob Starr, we've never found any relationship in Romney that's related to this family, ever. Nothing. And I checked everywhere to try to find out where the Starr family was. There was a Starr family here for a while. He was a doctor, but not a Starr family. We couldn't figure it out. So I got online, started snooping around, still couldn't find out much. And I had a friend I grew up with, Phil Rogers, lived next door to me in town where I live now. And he was in the Navy. He was an officer, and he lives out in Washington State, and I called him, and he said, let me look into it for you. And he called me back a week later. He says, I found his nephew. Lives in Florida, and he's 91 years old. He's a retired doctor. And I said, cool, give me the number. So I got the number from Bill, and I called this guy, 85-year-old retired doctor, not anymore. 85-year-old retired doctor. So I picked up the phone and I called him and I introduced myself, and you can tell, skeptical. I mean, who wouldn't be? And I said, I have found Jacob Granville Starr Jr.'s World War II submarine medals. And there was like silence on the other end of the phone, and then I heard, you've got Junior's medals? And I said, yes, sir, I do. And I said, do you have any connection at all to West Virginia? He says, well, I was born in Beckley. I said, do you have any connection at all to deafness or blindness? Because these were found on the campus of the West Virginia Schools for the Deaf and the Blind. He goes, no, I know nothing about how they got there. I said, would you like to have them? And he said, well, I don't have a lot of money, but I would like to have them. And I said, well, you don't have to pay for them. I'll mail them to you if you want them. And he goes, oh, yeah, I'll take them. So he gave me his address, and I mailed the medals off to him. And I called him in a couple weeks. And I said, did you get them? And he said, yes, we have them now up on the wall, on the place of honor.
Wow.
And I said, great. And he said, you know, the last time I saw Junior was, he says, we were just kids, and Junior came home. It's like 1939. He had actually enlisted pre-World War II. So he was in the submarine crew before that. But he enlisted prior to the war. He came home in his uniform, and he says, I can remember all of us kids wanting to be in the Navy because we wanted to look like Junior. And I thought, that's a cool story. That's a cool story. But submarine went down in 1945. No reason, never did find out why, but lost forever. But we found these medals.
Wow.
This is a story that...
Did you ever find a connection?
No, never did.
How the medals got there?
No idea how they ever ended up on campus. Impossible to tell. This was a story that Steve and I found out when we went to the Romney on the Menu evenings Louisa Hardy presented and told us about the Keller Hotel, which used to be up across from Sheets. That was where the Keller Hotel was located. But she had all 13 of the register books for the Keller Hotel, which was just like Steve and I went nuts trying to figure out, what are we going to do, what are we going to do? So we finally went up and we talked to her, and she let me take 2 books at a time and scan. And they're now all available online at historichampshire.org. We put them all up there for people to see. And they started in the 1850s and went all the way up until the hotel closed in 1911. So everybody signed in. So as Steve and I were looking at those, we ran into this Perry Warfield.
You found this great.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, I don't stop, Steve. So we found Perry, and we wondered, who is this guy? He's here every week in Romney at the Keller Hotel, and he is gone, and then he comes back the next week, and then he's here the next week, and then he's here the next week. And we started joking around. Well, who is this Perry Warfield guy? Why is he in Romney every week? So I just started looking around and talking to people, and the Cumberland paper online helped me out. Someone had that subscription, and he was a food salesman, a grocer, a wholesale grocer, and he would come to Romney each week and get the order and then take it back and fill it and everything. But Perry was a really cool guy. Evidently, we wish we would have met him and had an opportunity to talk to him. But he's buried over in Cumberland there, and actually came from a very wealthy family down in the Baltimore area. And the more you got into knowing Perry Warfield, I was like impressed with the guy. So that was pretty cool.
He was a regular at the Keller
He
Hotel.
was a regular every week at the Keller Hotel. This is new. This is so new. I just found it last week. I knew it was there. This is my 8th grade West Virginia history teacher, Catherine Long. She's the one that introduced me to Lieutenant John Blue in West Virginia history class in the 8th grade. First time I ever heard about Lieutenant John Blue was from her. Her master's thesis was written in 1949 on the pioneers, their homes and families in the Lower South Branch. I just scanned that last week. It was 230 some pages. I edited the whole thing down to 157 pages. It took forever because it was copied in the type from the old Courier font on a typewriter and then copied back in 1980. The copies weren't good, so when you scan it with OCR, you get about an 80% accuracy rate. So you have to go through every page, every period, every comma, and edit the thing. But I've got it done now, and it is a fascinating piece of Hampshire County history. And I'll be glad to share it with anybody who wants it. Just stop and give me your email address, and I'll email it to you. And it's about 8 megabytes, but it is absolutely fascinating to read. Kirkendalls, the Blues, the Harbisons, the Parsons, all of those families, all the stories that surround their house, all the old homes, Ridgedale, big house there at Hanging Rock up on the hill, the Kirkendalls house, the Parsons house down at the South Branch, or down at Potomac Eagle. All of those houses are there in this, and it is a fascinating read. I need to read it now for pleasure as opposed to every period, every freaking comma there is. I'm sort of tired of that part of it, but it's really good.
She was my West Virginia
teacher. She was, I just really, you think back to your teachers.
Yeah.
I mean, what a smart woman. I mean, 200 and some pages of Hampshire County history. She has first-hand interviews with people who were 80 years old then, post-Civil War people, and those houses, and what occurred in those houses back in the 1880s and 1890s and during the Civil War and stuff. She was first-hand accounts of a lot of people. It's a fascinating read.
She was very stern.
Yeah, well, she was. And you didn't mess around in her class, that's for sure. Obviously, I wasn't her best student. I'm also the School for the Deaf and the Blind historian up here. spend a lot of time. They had a newspaper up there called the West Virginia Tablet, and it was a school newsletter from 1880 to 1945. So I scanned all of those. There's, I don't know how many volumes, but whatever, there's a volume for every year there. So I scanned all of those, and then 1945 to 1988, when the last ones were printed in 1988, I got the blind alumni to pay with a grant to take them down to North Carolina. I drove down to North Carolina, and they were professionally scanned. Now, from 45 to 88, they're on the Schools for the Deaf and Blind website, so anybody can go in and look at those. And I spent a lot of time taking care of people's requests, and I got a few of those I'll show you. But people have graduated up there and want to know if there's anything available, and I can do. Most of the people who are alive now can go to the website and look themselves. But for the people who want to go back into the 1880s or 1890s, I've got copies. I don't have any place to put them. I don't have a website to put them online or anything, but we can get them. We can get them copies of them without any trouble at all. Those were all removed. I was fortunate enough to be asked to help before the administration burned down to move these books to a secure place, and they were all moved before the fire. So that was a blessing. It was in the right place at the right time. So these were pictures of some of the things we found in there's an old etching from the 1880s of what the school looked like after it was taken over and remodeled. When it was, the picture here is what the original building looked like before the Civil War. And that's the Temperance Society out in front in 1867. I found the article in the Hampshire Review that told about the meeting they were going to meet at the old, that was before the School for the Deaf and Blind. So they were going to meet at the Classical Institute. And that was the picture that was taken that day at that meeting in 1867. And then the etching was done after the third floor was installed, after the stairway and the two-story columns were removed. So and you can see what it looked like before that happened. And very sad day. Unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that was in there was furniture that was, the state had come up and already done an inventory of if everything was inside. A lot of it was made on campus, and the woodworking class back in the 30s and 40s made a lot of the furniture. Of course, it's all gone now. The safe that contained stuff that I had looked at but never got a chance to do anything with. During the fire, there was a big safe, and every time I was in it, they said, "Don't close the door. We don't have the combination. Don't close the door. Don't close the door." And the door was like this thick. Well, when the fire came, it burnt the floor, and the safe dropped straight down into the basement, and the door flew open and came back partially closed. So everything inside the safe was safe.
Wow.
Somehow. We spent a day I was with the state attorney from Charleston. She came up for she was the attorney for the state board. We spent the entire day with long rubber gloves, going in the smoke, the stench and everything, but we found stuff that I didn't even know existed that was saved from the fire, just by the fact that the safe dropped down in the basement. So we got all that out and preserved and scanned and everything. So that was a lesson. This is like my favorite story ever. Some lady in North Carolina emailed and said, "Can you help me discover something about my uncle who went to the school for the blind?" And his name is Talton Miller. He grew up in McDowell County, West Virginia. He was blinded at 6 years old from a blasting cap, because he grew up in McDowell County where the coal mines are. And that was a very common occurrence, that kids would find blasting caps laying around, and his was too close to the fire, blew up in his face and blinded him. Talton was here at different times. He didn't show up in school for the line until he was about, I think, 4th grade or something like that, because McDowell County to here in those days was a 5 or 6 day trip, and this was back in the 20s and the teens. So he finally showed up, and you go back and research, you go back to the tablets, and you start scanning those tablets and look for his name, and you could find him. He showed up here doing this, he showed up here doing that, his parents sent him $1, he bought his best friend, this little girl, some candy with $1, you know, just little snippets like that. I think that what I sent back to the parent was like 22 pages of just snippets of everything. He was a fiddle player, he learned to play the violin, because his dad, I learned, was a fiddle player. I talked to another nephew who was a doctor in Louisville, Kentucky, who heard from the lady in North Carolina that I was doing research, and he called me, and we talked a lot, and he told me a lot about the family. But I found this poem that his sister had written in 1922 on Facebook, or on Ancestry.com, and it's a really beautiful poem. I would have meant, well, it's a little small there, but it's a beautiful poem about Talton and how his blindness, how he got along with his blindness and stuff. But he died at a very young age, died at 20 years old, never did find out why. Did find out where he was buried in McDowell County, but I've never been there. As a result of Talton, I found, did more research and found 53 students who died on the campus of the West Virginia Schools for the Deaf and the Blind. Now, you got to consider 1880 or 1870 up to 1940 something, the difference, what life was like medically in those days. I mean, pneumonia, Spanish flu, all these things were going on, and kids never went home. They came in September, and they left again in May to go back home. So she's doing something, but I don't know. Oh, somebody outside. I'm sorry. I thought she was getting mad at me. Those 53 kids, as I started reading the obituaries in the newspaper, in the tablet, in the Hampshire Review, all of a sudden one said she was buried with her classmates at the Indian Mound Cemetery.
Wow.
And we had no idea there was a cemetery plot that the school owned at Indian Mound. And then this map appeared, this gray map here appeared, and I found it in some old papers. And right in this area here, plot number 22, plot number 23, are 2 plots that the school bought at some point in time for the kids to be buried there. Now, there was only 1 stone there with no mention of the Schools for the Deaf and the Blind on it. And it was in the back of lot number 23. So I started looking around, and there was 9 kids who were actually died at school who were buried in the Indian Mound Cemetery, and nobody knew it. There's no markers or anything. So I went to the administration and I said, let's get this taken care of. So that's when they purchased these 2 stones for the cemetery. So now when you go down there, you'll at least see all their names, and on the back of it is the West Virginia Schools for the Deaf and the Blind, established 1870, and on the front is the dates, the birth dates and the death dates of the 9 kids who were buried there. So that was one of the cooler things I think I've ever done, is to get those kids memorialized, because nobody knew. And when we got those installed, then I was looking around. Howard Hill Johnson was the founder of the school. He was a blind man back in 1860s, 1870 when the school was founded. His stone had been vandalized, I don't think on purpose. It had fallen over, his wife's stone had fallen over. So when we got those done, then I asked the school, could they pay for the cleaning and refurbishment of those 2 stones, and they did that at the same time. So the history of the school is preserved in Indian Mound, at least. Administration building's gone, but at least we got that part taken care of. This was another cool one. Please find my grandparents. This lady called me and said, They were both deaf. They were married at the school. And I went, I don't think so, but I'll look into it. I'm not going to marry kids at the school. I don't care what the story is there. And she says, well, at least they met at the school, and that's possible. So I went in, I also scanned all the enrollment books. So I went in, we opened up the files and started looking at all the scanned enrollments and everything. I found both of them, and on the internet I found her. That's the lady, I can't make out her name there, but I found a picture on Facebook of her at 16 years old, and it has, down below, it has her name, and then it has deaf. And that's how I knew I'd found the right girl. And then her husband, who was married later, had attended school but did not stay. He was in and out of school and then eventually left, but then they met up afterward and got married. But those were her grandparents, and she knew nothing about them while they were in school, and I knew everything I had.
Pretty seductive looking lady, wasn't she?
Yeah, I thought she was pretty cool. Yeah. She had going on. Sweet 16.
Sarah something.
Yeah, Sarah. It's
Can't tell what the last one is.
yeah, that picture was cut off when I found it, so I don't know. But here's Pennsylvania School for the Deaf was located. I can't tell. The library, you can see this picture down here, and those are little pieces of paper and staples. And I was up there looking one day for something, and I opened up one of the vertical files, and all these little pieces of paper and staples fell out on the floor. I went, what the heck's going on? And I looked at another one, and more, and people were going up there and just stealing what was in there, and they were like ripping off, you know, how you staple in the corner, and when they take 2 or 3 pages, it leaves these little pieces of paper, and the staple falls out. And I thought, well, this is ridiculous. We are losing valuable information, and people don't care. They're just stealing them and putting them in their coat, walking out the door, and nobody knows any different. So those file cabinets, there was 10 drawers, so I scanned all 10 drawers of information. And those are all now, anytime, I have a sign up there that if anybody comes in the library and wants family information, don't take it, email me and I will send you the file. So leave it where it is, don't steal it, and then I will send you the digital file of that family. Sometimes it's 5 or 6 different emails because of the size, but they're all preserved now and taken care of. So that's it. That's done. Like I said, scanning projects, I just do a lot. This is the Evelyn Bain collection. Evelyn was a friend of mine in Kaiser when I was working over there in the late 70s, I guess it was. Evelyn was this sweet old lady. She was in her 80s then. I got hooked up with her because she did some genealogy stuff. She was the mastermind of Mineral County genealogy. This lady knew everything about every family. And I would go out and sit at her table in the kitchen, and we would talk for hours and hours and hours. And Evelyn was an absolute sweetheart. And she had files after files after files. No computers in those days, very little typing. Everything was written on paper. And she had these little, like this one little note here, handwritten. There'd be deposit slips, notes written on the back. There would be church bulletins with notes written in the side. And I could just imagine her, because she would go to church, and if she would run into somebody, out would come whatever piece of paper she had or pen, and she'd write it down, and when she got back home, she'd drop it in this file. And that was her database, basically. And I was over in Kaiser about 5 years ago, and I ran into her daughter, and Evelyn had been gone 25, 30 years, and we always called them Granny's papers. Whatever happened, I said, Betty, whatever happened to Granny's papers? And she says, I don't know, Dan. There's 14 boxes of them in the back of the house. I don't know what to do. And I said, I don't know what to do. So I got all 14 boxes, brought it over and scanned all 14 boxes up. And we put them on the Internet Archives. So if you got Mineral County history, families, the Internet Archives has the Evelyn Bain collection now from her boxes and Granny's papers and the whole story about Granny and everything. She always told me her husband had enough of the genealogy stuff on their honeymoon in the 1920s. I made him stop at the cemetery so I could write down the stones. But she was a hoot. She was just the sweetest little girl. I loved her. Wapakonga newspaper is another great source of information. That's the Romney High School newspaper. I've been able to collect a lot of those and scan them. And as people come back into Romney looking for their ancestors, there's some great stories of their mother or father or grandparents in the Wapakonga newspaper. So I've got a lot of those that I can access. I try to scan everything as a searchable PDF. So when I go in and type it in, I can find it that way.
Were they preserved in any kind of a
I've never seen
archive?
them. I've never seen them. That's why I'm trying to collect whatever I can find. I don't have them all, but I have probably 80%. The Caponian is the paper at Cape and Bridge. I helped Cape and Bridge with their history book that they just published and came out this week or this month. And I went to their alumni reunion and I sat there with my scanner and scanned as many Caponians as they had, newspaper clippings and everything they had. So we just started that. John W. Mellon married in Oates. That's how I stumbled upon him. He had an undertaker's journal from Cape Bridge. He was pre-Giffen Funeral Home from 1883 to 1899. He buried 200 and some people during that period of time. And I never did recover the journal. The journal disappeared. I went back for it a couple years later, the guy had died, and the journal was gone. But I had common sense at the time to run up to Kentucky State and Kaiser and copy the whole thing, and then take it back to him. That was pre-scan, that was pre-computer. So then I did this sheet here for Charlie. Charlie's on historichampshire.org now. So if you're looking for ancestors buried in the Cape and Bridge area, during that time period, he could remember. Grandpa's Coffin Makers. Lady in Romney gave me this. This was back in the 1930, and it dates back to 1862. It goes up, and I scanned that one and did a spreadsheet for that as well, so you can read it, see who died, indexed it, and the whole deal. So it's all available now for people as well. This was in Newton Bennett Guthrie in Springfield, his store ledger, right there at the intersection in Cape Bridge or in Springfield. One goes left to Cumberland, one goes straight there down the valley, and the other one goes over the levels. That store right there was the Guthrie store. And Mr. Guthrie was an undertaker, along with quite the entrepreneur for selling goods and wares in his store. So the journal was 400 and some pages. So I scanned it all, and then at that point, you had to go through, because he would sell a bag of oats, a stalk of wheat, firewood, buried Mrs. Jones, and it was just sort of mixed in with everything else. And so you had to go through and sort of pick out who buried, who died, when they died. But a lot of times they don't list the name of the person who died. They list the person who paid. You know, Mr. Jones paid for his mother, and that was all it said. So then you have to go to the review, check the date, see if you can figure out and connect the dots. And so I did that as many as I could. I already talked a little bit about the Keller Hotel registries. Those are online at historichampshire.org. Those are fun to look through. There's, I did an article for the Hampshire Review on 1864 when the Ringgold Cavalry was here during Christmas. They stayed at the Keller Hotel. It was the only entry during the entire Civil War that they signed into a journal, or the only one that was recovered. Let's say they may have other people stay there, but Mrs. Hardy didn't have those yet. But the Ringgold Cavalry was here right before Christmas. So they were on a scouting trip. This is what I really like when you find, like, there's Grandpa's Undertaker's Journal with someone who died, and then Evelyn Bain's collection. You can see her little note there, and that was the death of the person. So you can cross-reference these obscure sources. They have the same information, the same dates, the same time, the same people, and you can cross-reference them. And that gives me a little hope that a lot of this stuff is really good. You find two sources for it. That's a good thing.
How do you do that, man?
How do you do that?
How do you,
You just,
I mean, do you index it or?
I don't know. I have those Emily Bain's notes
Right.
are done by family. When I scan them. There's 100, I think there's 101
Does
families.
something just ring a bell and say,
Yeah,
oh, that
yeah.
was in Grandpa's Undertaker?
That's, and when you scan that, you think, oh, I wonder if that one's over there. And
Also, it's your memory is what's.
well, there's some people that would disagree with that. Look in the mirror, and I got a sticky note that tells me my name every morning. I guess for the history, I guess I'm better at it. Those are the articles I write for the Hampshire Review. Those are really, I think, really neat to do. They take a lot of time. They don't take much time to write. But boy, they take a long time to research. For 600 words once a month keeps me stressed out. It's the only stress I have in my life is making the deadline for the Hampshire Review because, oh, God, I'm getting ready to leave for 10 days, so I had to get that one in before I left. This is something that I just made up. Share history for all to research and enjoy. I just think there's so much history in people's homes, in their attics, on their bookshelves, in their photo albums, and they don't realize the value of it. I mean, you don't have to. You might have a photo album of the 1920s with people, but in the background, there's downtown Romney and all the places that you can go to. And you may not pay much attention to who's in the picture, but the background is just chock full of goodies. And I'm still looking for a nice picture of the block across the street here because it all burnt down in the Great Romney Fire in 1922. And I don't get to see much of that part of Romney. So that'll be another story that I'll do eventually. This is probably one of the more powerful things. And can you all read that? Is that something you'll spend a few minutes reading? You want me to read it to you? Okay. As the Mayflower was coming from England to the New World in 1620, an indentured servant named John Howland climbed on deck to get a breath of fresh air and was hurled overboard when the ship rolled suddenly in a shifting gale. As he flew over the side, he grabbed blindly at a dangling halyard and though he was carried far beneath the waves, somehow held on long enough for the crew to haul him back to safety. John Howland's survival was fortuitous and random as his near-fatal plunge. In the New World, he would thrive, work off his indenture, become the cornerstone of the colony, and marry a pretty young woman named Elizabeth Tilley. She would bear him 10 children, who would in turn produce 88 grandchildren, from whom over the next 4 centuries an estimated 2 million Americans would descend, including Ralph Waldo Emerson, Joseph Smith, Franklin Roosevelt, Humphrey Bogart, Chevy Chase, both George Bush's father and son. So it all just dangles. I mean, you think about that guy that got swept over on that boat on the Mayflower, and he survived, and 2 million people descended from him because of that he was saved. And two presidents, or 3 presidents, right there. So that's sort of, in 200 years, people will be searching your family, and you're going to be their ancestors. And I don't know if anybody's got to have 10 kids and 88 grandchildren, but for the most part, it's a pretty amazing thing. That struck me as like, oh my God, it's a lot of people that descended from that guy, just on the whim that he got hauled back in and survived. Because if he did, he wasn't here, there'd be too many people gone. Like that. Questions? I'm done.
Thank you for doing what you did.
Yeah.
A lot of fun.
Is there anybody that does like house tours?
Well, we've done house tours in the past. I've got some scanned, believe it or not, I've got some scanned documents. There's some, during Heritage Days, which we used to have here, it's now replaced by the Peach Festival, which is replaced by Summer Harvest. There were house tours. And I think that's probably something that will be picked back up again as people get better acquainted with what's going on. I mean, there's so many houses that when you get into Catherine Long's thesis on those old homes, my Lord, South Branch Valley just is filled with these old homes.
Are there a lot vacant? A lot?
No, not too many vacant old homes anymore, no.
Some of the same families still live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Parsons house down in South Branch is still owned by the Parsons. And that was, gosh, Mary, what was that, 1810 or something? I mean, it's been in the family over 200 years, yeah. So, yeah. It's something that really needs to happen. And I know the Shaws down at Ridgedale had their house opened a number of different times. It's a beautiful home, beautiful home. Questions? Anything else? Comments? Smart remarks? Okay, thank you.
Those plots that the kids from the deaf and blind school are in,
I'm sorry?
the plots that the
Yes,
the deaf
okay,
and blind
yeah.
school are in, are, I mean, do we know how, was it just like one small plot and they're just like buried on top of each other, or is it?
You'd have to get ground penetrating radar to know that. We didn't do that. I don't know where they are within those two plots, really don't.
When you say plots,
There's,
I think of plots as like a burial spot,
No.
a burial spot.
no, they're
They're
large,
just like-
yeah,
okay.
large plots. You can go down and look and you'll see. We did cornerstones. The school paid for the little square blocks at each corner of the two plots. So they're sort of laid off there, yeah. But one of the funerals, all the kids from the school walked from the school all the way down to the cemetery. And the way it was written in the tablet was just beautiful about the kids walking in the sunset and the kids singing at the cemetery, and really neat.
Was there a church like up by the farm hall one time?
Yeah, that was the Romney Brew
Okay, were the
Station.
children buried up there first?
No, because that closed in 1860. The school didn't start till 1870.
Okay, so they were never up there one time?
No.
Okay,
Now, there were children buried there, not from
yeah,
the school,
but it wasn't,
because the school wasn't in existence.
okay.
I've counted, like we were talking today,
You said something like 100
yeah,
or something
there
like
was
that.
a really cool article. It's on my website for free download. I think it's also on historichampshire.org. Someone wrote before the Civil War, beautiful 2-part, 3-column article about this cemetery. It was buried there, and I went through the article and fine-tooth comb and picked out 101 names of people who were very early pioneers of Hampshire County, and Romney were buried there. And there are others, and I told Dale today, it's another project I need to do, is go through the Indian mound and identify the tombstones there that are dated prior to 1860. Because some of the tombstones were moved from up here down to there. And just tombstones, we don't think any bodies were ever moved. Because it lay barren up here for 80 years before the city did anything about it. People were so disappointed. And articles in the newspaper about how bad that cemetery looked. and they never did anything with it for 80 years. It was the 1840s or 1940s. Yeah, it was close in 1860. And the one behind the bank of Romney was made into a garden, and no one ever did anything with those bodies. They're still underneath the parking lot, if there's anything left of them. I mean, I doubt if there is, just dust.
Dan, do you find that when you read old newspapers, I know when I read them, they are so much more detailed and in some instances very graphic with things that happen. We would, in today's society, think of putting the graphic,
in there,
the
yeah.
sensationalized graphic detail.
Right.
And it's just, you're looking at the newspaper articles from, you know, even 70 or 80 years ago versus now, it's
Big difference.
huge difference,
Yeah.
huge difference.
Yeah, I found one, and I can't remember where it was, I didn't make note of it, but it was an education administrator from Hampshire County who had done some absolutely awful things to some kids. And it was all over the newspaper. And for week after week after week, and I just, oh my gosh.
And probably very detailed one.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, it was, and they finally got rid of it,
Yeah.
so, which is good.
And I found that with, when I was researching with the death of a great Howard B. Tom's uncle of mine that was killed in a sawmill accident. And
Yeah.
the very graphic detail
Yeah.
was like,
The
whoa.
arm, yeah,
Oh,
I read
no, it
all
was-
those, yeah, cut the body in half, and the head fell off, and went down the street, you know, that kind of thing.
That was the way they wrote it,
Oh,
yeah.
I know. Sad, true.
On a happy note, if you got married, they described the bride's dress and flowers and the
Yes.
party and everything.
Yes, they did.
So, yeah, it was,
Yes, yeah,
you
that's
get a
true.
lot of idea of life back then.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank y'all, appreciate it.